The marble floors of Premier United Bank gleamed under the fluorescent lights, polished so thoroughly that every step echoed like a whisper of importance. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows on Peachtree Street, throwing golden streaks across the black leather chairs lined neatly in the waiting area. Everything in this Atlanta branch spoke of prestige and quiet authority, vaulted ceilings, hushed conversations, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with freshly printed currency. To most people, it felt like a place where money itself lived and breathed. Behind the counter stood Brittany Coleman. She was only 26, but she wore her authority like a crown. Her blonde highlights shimmered every time she turned her head, catching the light in flashes that she knew made her look professional, even glamorous. The small gold badge pinned above her heart read, Employee of the Month, March 2024. She had rehearsed her smile in the mirror that morning, sharp but polished, the kind of smile that said, I know what I'm doing here. Beneath that confidence, though, there was a pulse of insecurity she never let anyone see. She had grown up poor, always feeling like the world underestimated her. Now, standing on the marble stage of the bank, she felt powerful. Every check she inspected, every decision she made, those were moments where she finally mattered. Brittany tapped her manicured nails against the glass counter, waiting for the next customer. It was a nervous habit disguised as rhythm. Her eyes scanned the line, suits, dresses, handbags polished to perfection. She enjoyed the little thrill of sizing people up. Some walked in already looking guilty, she thought. Others carried themselves like money was stitched into their very skin. She believed she could tell the difference. Then the doors opened, and in stepped a man who didn't belong in her picture of wealth. Darius King walked with a calm, steady pace. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the weathered hands of someone who had worked hard for decades. His jeans were plain, faded but clean. His boots looked practical, not stylish. His t-shirt was unbranded, simple, the color muted by time. To the casual eye, he was ordinary, maybe even forgettable. But there was something in the way he carried himself, something in the quiet weight of his posture that set him apart. People moved without realizing it, giving him space as though his presence demanded it. Brittany's lips tightened. She caught herself frowning but didn't stop. She leaned forward slightly, studying him. He didn't look like the people who normally walked into this branch with large sums of money. No Rolex, no tailored suit, no designer shoes clicking on the marble, just jeans and boots. She reminded herself of the policy. Appearances matter. Suspicious checks slip through careless hands. Darius didn't rush. He nodded politely to the security guard, offered a faint smile to an older woman juggling her purse and phone, then placed himself at Brittany's counter. His eyes, a deep, steady brown, met hers with quiet politeness. "Afternoon," he said, his voice calm but carrying a resonance that made her straighten instinctively. Something about his tone unsettled her. It wasn't loud or forceful. It was the calm of someone who never needed to raise his voice to command respect. "Afternoon," Brittany replied, her nails still tapping against the counter. "What can I do for you today?" He pulled out a check, folding it carefully open, and slid it across the glass. The paper looked ordinary to Brittany, but the number stamped in bold digits was anything but ordinary. $5,000. Her eyes flicked from the amount to the man before her, then back again. A government disability compensation check. A thought darted across her mind, sharp as broken glass. This doesn't add up. The room around them hummed with routine banking business. Phones buzzed, printers clicked, coins clinked into trays. But here, at this single counter, a different kind of electricity filled the air. Brittany felt it before she even realized what it was. The beginning of something that would unravel the rest of her day, and maybe her entire career. Darius stood patiently, his hands resting lightly on the counter, as if he had all the time in the world. His expression revealed nothing, not even a flicker of concern. Brittany studied him again, feeling her chest tighten. She wanted to dismiss the unease, but she couldn't. Something about him felt out of place, too calm, too certain, like he was waiting for her to make a mistake. And she would. In that ordinary afternoon, inside that polished Atlanta branch, the stage was set. What began as routine banking business was about to transform into a storm that would shake walls far beyond the marble floors of Premier United Bank. The check slid across the glass counter like a challenge. Brittany Coleman's eyes narrowed as she lifted it between two manicured fingers. She scanned the crisp print, the watermark, the neat government seal stamped in the corner. Everything looked official, too official. That was the problem. She had handled thousands of checks in her 2 years at Premier United Bank, and the ones that looked too perfect always made her suspicious. $5,000, she said, aloud, letting her voice carry just enough for the line behind the man to hear. The businessman tapping his Rolex shifted closer. The young mother with a baby bounced nervously, and an elderly couple looked up from their phones. People leaned in. Brittany liked when they leaned in. It made her feel like the gatekeeper, the one holding the keys to legitimacy. Her eyes flicked up, settling on the man's face. He stood calmly, no twitch, no nervous shifting. His hands rested on the counter with a patience that irritated her. Most people would fidget under her scrutiny, offer nervous explanations, maybe even crack a joke to lighten the tension. Not. This man, he just waited. "What's this for?" Brittany asked, her tone sharper than she intended. "Disability compensation," he replied evenly. "From the Department of Veterans Affairs." The words made her pause just for a breath before her mask returned. Veterans came in sometimes, sure, but $5,000? In her mind, he didn't look like someone who would be trusted. With that much, his jeans were faded, boots scuffed, t-shirt plain, not a suit, not polished shoes, not even a pressed button-down. And yet here he was, sliding across a check that could cover 2 months of her rent. Brittany smirked slightly, the corners of her lips curling in practiced superiority. "We get a lot of these, you know, printed from home. People think we won't notice." She held the check up against the light, as if she were some kind of forensic expert. The fluorescent bulbs caught on the watermark, but she barely looked. Her suspicion was already cemented. The man didn't flinch. "It's a legitimate check," he said, voice calm, steady. "I'd appreciate it if you'd process it." Something about his tone irritated her more than the check itself. Too calm, too certain, as if he knew something she didn't. She felt heat rise in her chest, the old insecurity whispering in her ear, "Don't let him think he's above you. Don't let him make you look small in front of these people." Her nails tapped against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was small but sharp, like a clock counting down to something inevitable. The businessman with the Rolex coughed impatiently. The young mother shushed her crying baby, eyes darting between Brittany and the man. The tension in the lobby thickened. Phones were already out. Someone was filming. Brittany saw it but didn't stop them. If anything, she liked the attention. "You don't look like someone who'd be getting this kind of money," she said finally, her words laced with condescension. The silence that followed was heavy. A couple in line shifted uncomfortably. The security guard by the door lifted his head, watching closely now. The man's jaw tightened just slightly, but his voice remained measured. "And what does someone who gets this kind of money look like?" It was a simple question, but it cut through the lobby like broken glass. Brittany's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning, sharper than ever. "Not like that," she said, gesturing vaguely to his clothes. Jeans, boots, t-shirt. The elderly Asian woman near the back audibly gasped, clutching her phone tighter. She whispered into it, her finger hovering over the Go Live button. Brittany didn't notice. She had already decided how this story ended. With a slow, deliberate motion, she tore the check clean in half. The rip echoed in the marble chamber, louder than it should have. The paper fluttered down onto the counter like wounded birds, landing at the man's hands. Gasps filled the room. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Another whispered, "Is she allowed to do that?" The man, still, calm, unbelievably calm, didn't move. He simply looked at the torn paper, then lifted his eyes back to hers. His gaze was steady, piercing, not angry, but heavy with something that unsettled her. "I'd like to speak with your manager," he said quietly. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried through the bank, the kind of calm that comes from surviving. Storms far worse than this moment, the kind of calm that made Brittany's stomach twist, though she refused to show it. The businessman with the Rolex raised his phone higher. The young mother pressed record. The elderly woman's finger finally tapped "Go live." And in that moment, on what should have been just another ordinary afternoon, Brittany Coleman made the mistake that would soon define the rest of her career. The rip of paper hung in the air, longer than any sound deserved to, a jagged tear that seemed to slice through the hush of the bank. Two halves of a government check drifted down in slow motion and settled against the glass with a soft whisper. The lobby stilled as if the air had thickened. Brittany Coleman straightened her shoulders and let the corner of her mouth rise, a small smile she had practiced for moments like this, moments where she felt bigger than the room. The man in front of her did not move. He looked at the torn check as if it were a photograph of someone he once knew. Nothing in his face changed. His hands, steady, scarred in small ways that hinted at work and time, rested flat on the counter. The glass squeaked when he lifted one palm and set it down again, almost like a pianist searching for the right key before the first note. A businessman. Two people back raised his phone higher. The young mother near the end of the line bounced her baby and whispered, "Oh my God." Someone clicked their tongue in disbelief. The security guard by the door shifted his weight and turned his chin a degree, the way men do when they are telling themselves to watch and not intervene. Only the printers kept their rhythm, and even they sounded hesitant. "I'd like to speak with your manager," the man said. His voice was soft and clear, the kind of calm that does not beg. It expects. Brittany's smile tightened into something harder. She lifted the two halves from the counter and held them like evidence. "Sir," she said, each word clean and clipped, "we have protocols. Suspicious documents are destroyed. We can't cash every piece of paper that comes through." The door. He looked up at her, and the contact of his gaze landed with a weight she had not anticipated. "That was my check," he said. "You didn't verify it. You didn't even try." There it was, the understated accusation. It pressed on her pride. "I know what I saw," she replied. "We get these all the time. People print them at home and think we won't notice." She gestured vaguely toward his clothes with one of the torn halves, like a flag waved carelessly. "You understand." "Do I?" The question carried no edge, but it carried meaning. He let it linger for a heartbeat. "Call your manager." Something small flashed in her eyes. Fear, annoyance, the old voice that told her she was not enough, and had to prove. She set the pieces back down, deliberately misaligned them by a fraction, and tapped the glass with her nail. Tap, tap, tap. Across the lobby, a woman in a floral blouse whispered, "You can't do that," to nobody in particular. The elderly Asian woman near the wall, Mrs. Chen, a regular with a gentle way of correcting receipts, held her phone upright and squinted at the screen. A red dot began to glow. "Managers are busy," Brittany said. "It'll be a while." "I have time," he said. He did not blink. He did not fidget. His calm unnerved her more than anger would have. Anger would have given her something to push against. This felt different, like standing at a cliff's edge and realizing the drop is farther than you thought. The front doors opened, and a rush of warm Atlanta air and street noise filled the space for a moment. A teenager slipped in with a skateboard under one arm, took one look at the scene, and slowed down. The guard lifted a hand in an easy, automatic greeting, then let it fall, eyes returning to the counter. Brittany picked up the desk phone and dialed, letting it ring longer than necessary. "Angela," she said when the connection clicked, "we have a situation at Teller 3. She glanced up just enough to make sure he heard the word situation. She wanted that to live in the air between them. He was already gathering the halves of the check delicately, as if even torn things deserve care. He aligned the edges with a precision that made her feel messy, then laid them down again, joined but still broken. "Do you have identification?" she asked, pretending the call had ended differently. "Military ID, driver's license, something official." He reached calmly into a worn leather portfolio and placed 2 cards on the glass. The fluorescent lighting caught the small holographic elements. She did not pick them up. She did not lean in. She barely glanced. "You don't need to see them," he asked. "I know what this is," she said. And she heard the echo of a dozen old versions of herself in that answer. The girl who got laughed at for not knowing, the teenager who swore she would never be the one who didn't. She swallowed and squared her chin. "We can't be fooled by paper, not here." The businessman with the phone cleared his throat, the sound just this side of a laugh. "Looks pretty official to me," he said, not quite under his breath. The young mother turned her baby to the side, away from the glare, and pressed record with her thumb. In the reflection on the counter, the tiny red dots multiplied. Witnesses being born. "Ma'am," the man said, "you still haven't called your manager." "I did," she lied, then winced internally when a voice from the speakerphone crackled to life because she had not replaced the handset properly. A curt professional tone drifted out. "Brittany, I'll be out in a minute." 2 customers heard it. Her jaw stiffened. He did not smile, but something in his posture softened, like a musician relaxing between measures. He looked at the wall. Clock above the withdrawal slips. The second hand ticked with a small, insistent sound. "Thank you," he said, as if the voice had spoken to him. Behind them, Mrs. Chen lifted her phone higher. "We are live from Peachtree," she whispered, more to herself than to the 1,000 invisible strangers she hoped might appear. "This doesn't feel right." Brittany heard the whisper and felt heat pool in her neck. She reached for something, anything, to reassert control. "Sir," she said, enunciating each syllable as if to a child, "you can't expect to walk in here dressed like that, hand over a big check, and not be questioned." The sentence hung in the air, fusing with the room like the smell of something burning. The guard's eyes flicked, a quick reflex of discomfort. The businessman lowered his phone for half a second, then lifted it higher, not missing a beat. Somewhere near the door, the teenager with the skateboard said, "Wow," softly, like a word you're not supposed to say in church. The man did not take the bait. He lifted his ID with 2 fingers and slid it back into the portfolio. "Question. Me," he said. "Verify call, scan, but don't destroy what you haven't examined." "It's standard," she said, even though she knew it wasn't. Not exactly. Not like that. Not without a supervisor. She felt the facts like stubborn pebbles in a shoe and decided to keep walking anyway. He glanced again at the clock. The second hand climbed and clicked. His gaze returned to hers, with a gravity that made the skin between her shoulders draw tight. "Every day," he said, "someone has to decide who looks like money." The line rustled. It was not a loud sound, but it was collective, the kind of sound that comes when people realize they are in a moment that will give them a story to tell at dinner. The baby hiccuped. A receipt printer coughed out a thin strip and fell quiet. Outside, a siren wailed and receded. The back office door opened. A woman in a navy suit stepped out, heels knocking a measured rhythm across the marble. The manager carried herself like a verdict. She took in the crowd, the phones, the two halves of the check, and then the man. For a fraction of a second, her expression softened at the sight of the torn paper. It hardened again when she looked at Brittany. "What happened?" she asked. "He brought in a suspicious check," Brittany said, finding her voice and pouring certainty into it. "A high-risk instrument. I followed protocol." The manager's eyes moved to the halves on the glass. She reached for them. Brittany placed her hand down first, pinning them with a manicured finger, and forced a tight smile, the kind that asks for approval while daring correction. The manager's brow lifted a degree. She removed her hand. Brittany felt the room tilt. The man spoke before anyone could. "I asked for verification," he said. "I asked for a manager. She tore it up." He did not embellish. He did not accuse. He placed the simple truth between them and stepped back half an inch, giving it more space than she had given him. In the reflection on the counter, his face looked composed and tired, like faces you see on soldiers in photographs. Mrs. Chen's live stream caught the manager's small inhale, the kind you take when you're steadying a tray that is about to slip. The businessman whispered to his phone, "This is not going to end well." The teenager mouthed the same sentence, slow, as if learning choreography. "Sir," the manager said, professional but cautious now, "do you have identification?" Nodded and offered the portfolio again. Her hands were careful. She studied the holograms. She traced the microprint with her eyes. She lifted the check halves and brought them close to the light. For the first time since the paper tour, the room felt like a place where things could be repaired. Brittany stared straight ahead, chin high, even as her pulse kicked. She told herself the only thing that mattered was not looking small. She told herself the policy was on her side, that confidence could be a shield. Yet the shield felt thin. She could feel the heat of eyes pressing through it, hundreds of lenses boiling the moment down to a dozen angles. The man looked at the clock one more time, as if he had memorized the seconds, as if he had scheduled this humiliation and placed it neatly in the middle of his day. Then he returned his gaze to the people around him, not accusing, just taking inventory. Who spoke, who filmed, who looked away. When the manager finally lowered the cards, the tiniest change crossed her face, not enough to name, enough to know. She set the halves of the check down gently, as if proximity could make them whole. "We'll resolve this," she said, and, for the first time, the word sounded like a promise instead of a threat. The man nodded once, slow. Brittany felt something cold slide down her spine, like a bead of water under a collar. She doubled down, because sometimes doubling down feels safer than standing still. "Just so we're clear," she said, careful. "Now aiming for poise and hitting something brittle. We can't be fooled here, not by paper, not by appearances." He held her eyes. The lobby did not breathe. "That," he said, "is exactly what I'm counting on." The words settled, with a soft, ominous weight, the kind of weight you only recognize after the floor has already moved. The phones did not blink. The red lights stayed on. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter thudded faintly against the summer sky, far enough away to ignore, close enough to be a fact. The word resolve still lingered in the air when Devon Harris pushed through the office door like a man stepping onto a stage he thought he owned. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, the posture of someone who believed authority could be worn like cologne, sprayed on thick and choking. He didn't bother asking questions before speaking. He simply glanced at the torn check, then at the man standing calm and still, and let his smirk finish the insult Brittany had begun. "Sir, we have protocols for suspicious documents." The word "sir" was coated in sarcasm. He didn't need to say more. His tone told the crowd exactly what he thought. This wasn't a customer. This was a problem. The businessman with the Rolex whispered something into his phone, and the red light blinked brighter. The young mother's baby had stopped crying, sensing the heaviness of the room. The skateboarder slid down the wall near the door, eyes wide, phone camera steady. Every angle captured the unfolding storm. The man, Darius, didn't flinch. His hands remained flat on the counter. His eyes tracked Devon, with the calm of someone watching a child misbehave, not with anger, but with a quiet patience that unnerved the assistant manager. "I'd like corporate's number," Darius said, voice even, "and some tape to repair." "My check," Devon laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't a burst of humor, but a sharp bark meant to sting. "Corporate won't waste their time on situations like this," he said, spreading his stance, legs wide, like a cop in a procedural drama. His body language screamed intimidation. His words dripped with dismissal. Gasps rippled through the line. The elderly couple exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that carried decades of knowing. The mother hugged her baby closer. Mrs. Chen's live-stream chat was exploding with comments now. "Get his badge number. Record everything. This is discrimination. Don't let them get away with this." Still, Darius didn't raise his voice. "You tore up a government check without verification," he said, eyes steady on Devon. "That isn't protocol. That's a bias." Devon's smirk faltered, but only for a heartbeat. He leaned on the counter, deliberately crowding Darius's space. "You think throwing around words like that is going to change anything? Look around you, buddy. You walked in here with a fake check, and you expect us to just hand over $5,000. Not happening." "Not every check," Darius said softly. "Every piece of paper. That's what you called it." The reminder landed hard. Devon straightened, defensive, and crossed his arms. He hadn't expected the man to remember, to throw his words back like polished stones. Behind them, Mrs. Chen whispered into her phone mic, "This is bigger than just a check." Her viewer count ticked upward. 112. 178, 2143. Brittany's nails tapped again against the counter. Tap, tap, tap. The sound seemed to echo in the marble chamber, like a metronome marking the rhythm of humiliation. She looked triumphant, as if every tap was a nail sealing a coffin. The crowd leaned in. The businessman raised his phone higher. The teenager mouthed to his live stream, "This is about to blow up." Darius exhaled slowly, his calm so steady it made the hair on the back of Devon's neck bristle. He reached into his jacket. Devon's body stiffened, instinct firing before reason, but all Darius pulled out was a leather portfolio. Rich brown, with gold corner reinforcements, the kind of item that whispered wealth to those who knew what they were seeing. He opened it with deliberate precision and slid out a military ID, placing it on the glass. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Infantry Badge. The fluorescent lights caught the hologram like a blade. Mrs. Chen gasped audibly, catching it all on camera. The comments on her live stream exploded. "He's a veteran. This is racial profiling. Call the news." Devon barely glanced at it. His dismissal was sharper than any insult. "IDs can be fake too," he said. The words fell heavy. The crowd shifted. A businessman in the back shook his head in disbelief. The teenager whispered to his phone, "They're really doubling down." Brittany leaned in, her smirk wider than ever. "We see this all the time. People using fake checks and fake IDs, thinking we'll just hand out free money. It's insulting." "Insulting to whom?" Darius asked, his voice quiet but piercing. "To the bank? Or to you personally?" Her smirk flickered, but she pushed forward. "You walk in here looking like that." She gestured again at his boots, his jeans, his plain shirt. "And expect us to believe you're entitled to thousands of dollars. Come on." The words "looking like that" hit the room like a slap. Phones tilted higher. Customers leaned in. The elderly man near the back finally spoke. "That's not right. He's just trying to cash his check." "Sir," Brittany snapped, her composure cracking. "Mind your business," her tone cut like glass. But it was too late. The room had shifted. The crowd was no longer indifferent. They were witnesses. The collective gaze pressed down on her, on Devon, on the entire bank. Darius's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. "Every day, someone decides who looks like money. Today, you've made your decision." He glanced at the clock. 3:04 p.m. His lips moved almost imperceptibly. 43 minutes left. "What's that supposed to mean?" Devon barked. Darius didn't answer. The room thickened with anticipation, like the hush before a storm breaks. The air conditioning hummed, printers clicked faintly, but everything else seemed suspended. Mrs. Chen's live stream passed 500 viewers. Hashtags began to crawl across the chat feed. Chat to bank discrimination. Veteran humiliated. Justice for Darius. The manager, Angela Torres, appeared in the doorway then, heels sharp against marble, eyes already scanning the scene like a hawk circling prey. She saw the crowd, the phones, the check halves, and the unshaken calm of the man. At the counter. "What?" she demanded, her voice sharp as glass. "Is going on here?" The line of customers held their breath. The businessman whispered to his phone, "This is the moment. Watch." And in that charged silence, surrounded by flashing red lights of recording phones, the real storm began. The silence, after Angela Torres's words, was the kind that carried weight, a silence filled not with calm, but with anticipation, the kind of silence you hear before a jury delivers its verdict. The crowd of customers leaned in closer, phones held higher, red recording dots blinking like restless eyes. Angela's heels clicked as she stepped forward, each sound sharp against the marble. Her suit was pressed to perfection, her hair pulled into a bun so tight it gave the impression of discipline. She didn't just walk into the room, she arrived like a command. Her gaze swept across the torn halves of the check, then up to the man who stood so still, so composed, it unsettled her. She looked next to Brittany, who sat stiff with her arms crossed, and finally to Devon, puffing his chest like he was waiting for applause. "Explain this," Angela demanded, her tone clipped, controlled, the voice of someone used to shutting things down quickly. "He came in with what looked like a counterfeit check," Brittany said quickly, rushing her words as if speed could make them true. "I followed protocol, destroyed it, standard procedure." Angela raised one brow, unimpressed. Her eyes dropped to the fragments again, then back up at the man. He didn't speak, didn't rush to defend himself, didn't even break eye contact. He simply let the accusation hang there, knowing silence can sometimes scream louder than words. "Suspicious, my foot," the elderly man at the back of the line muttered, his voice loud enough this time for the entire room to hear. He was tired of watching. "That's a government check. Anybody can see that." Angela's head snapped in his direction, her glare sharp as glass. "Sir, unless you're involved in this transaction, I'll ask you to keep your comments to yourself." But it was too late. The room had shifted. The businessman in the tailored suit raised his phone higher, speaking directly into his live stream. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing racial profiling at Premier United Bank on Peachtree Street. Look closely at what's happening here." His voice carried a journalistic cadence, the kind that turned ordinary events into headline news. The young mother stepped closer, rocking her baby gently as she steadied her phone. "I'm recording this," she announced, voice trembling with anger, "because this doesn't feel right. This isn't how you treat people." Mrs. Chen's livestream counter surged past 1,000 viewers. Comments flooded the screen faster than her aging eyes could read. "Unbelievable. That's a vet's ID right there. How dare they? Get the media here now. This is America in 2024, caught in HD." Angela felt the shift too. The room was no longer a private dispute. It was a theater, and the entire internet was filling the seats. Her pulse quickened, though her face remained composed. She couldn't let them see fear. Not here, not in front of her employees. "Sir," Angela said, turning her full attention to Darius, "this branch cannot allow counterfeit checks to be processed. If you do not leave the premises, I'll have no choice but to call the police." The crowd gasped. Even Devon faltered, shooting her a quick glance as if to ask whether she'd gone too far. But Angela held her ground, her voice louder now, projecting authority as though volume alone could make her right. Darius finally spoke. His voice was calm, measured, but it cut through the room like steel through silk. "I am not leaving until this is resolved properly," the businessman in the suit whispered into his phone. "And there it is, the line in the sand." Angela gave a tight smile, one that never reached her eyes. "Then I'll call the police for trespassing." It was the word trespassing that broke the room. Phones tilted upward in unison. The young mother gasped. The elderly man shook his head. The skateboarder muttered, "Oh, this is gonna blow up." "Mrs." Jen's viewer count doubled in less than a minute. Comments poured in. "This is disgusting. Call CNN, call Fox, call everyone." Bank shame trending. Veteran versus discrimination. Share this now. The red lights of a dozen phones created a constellation around the counter, each one a witness, each one a broadcast tower. Brittany leaned forward, her nails tapping again, the rhythm more aggressive. Now, like she was keeping time to the humiliation. "We see this all the time," she sneered. "People like him walking in with fake documents thinking we're stupid." "People like him?" the elderly woman near the back repeated, her voice trembling with outrage. The phrase hung in the air like a toxic fog. It was no longer about the check. It wasn't even about the money. It was about dignity, respect, the invisible line between who was believed and who was dismissed. Darius's jaw tightened. His eyes, calm until now, carried a flicker of something deeper, not anger, not fear, but resolve. He looked at the clock again, 3:07 p.m. His lips moved quietly. 38 minutes left. Angela heard him and frowned. "Remaining for what?" "Nothing that concerns you," he said. "Yet." The yet landed like a warning, though his tone remained even. The room erupted with whispers. The businessman whispered, "He knows something." The skateboarder muttered, "Oh, he's got a plan." The live stream comments filled with speculation. What's happening in 38 minutes? Who is this guy? Angela straightened, pulling her phone from her pocket with a sharp flick. "That's it. I'm calling the police." Mrs. Chen gasped into her live stream. "They're calling the police on a veteran." Her voice shook with disbelief, her audience soaring past 2,000 now. The sound of Angela's voice dialing 911 was crisp, deliberate, theatrical. She wanted the room to hear it. She wanted control. But what she didn't realize, what no one realized, was that with every second that passed, control was slipping further from her grasp and into his. Because Darius King wasn't just a man with a torn check. He wasn't just a veteran standing against humiliation. He was something else entirely. Something none of them could yet imagine, and the countdown had already begun. Angela Torres held the phone to her ear, her voice clipped and precise as she gave the address. Premier United Bank, Peachtree Street. Individual refusing to leave. Possible counterfeit check. The words individual and counterfeit echoed like slurs, deliberate reductions of identity. The crowd stirred. The businessman in the suit muttered into his live stream, "Notice the language, not customer, not veteran, just individual. Listen to the framing." Mrs. Chen's live stream surged past 3,000 viewers, comments, racing across her screen. This is profiling, plain and simple. They're weaponizing language against him. Stay strong, brother. We see you. Angela lowered the phone, her expression hard as polished stone. "The police will be here in 10 minutes, she announced. her voice carrying authority to the farthest corners of the marble lobby. The words hit like a gavel, final and absolute. The line of customers gasped collectively. The skateboarder swore under his breath. The young mother hugged her baby tighter, whispering, "This isn't right." Through it all, Darius didn't move. His calmness unsettled the room more than shouting ever could have. He simply looked at the clock again. 3:10 p.m., 34 minutes remaining. Angela noticed and frowned. "Why do you keep checking the... and time?" He looked at her, his gaze steady and unflinching. "Because timing," he said, "is everything." The words sent a ripple through the room. Phones captured every syllable, every pause. The live-stream chats exploded with theories. What's happening at 3:44? He's waiting for something. Maybe the media. This feels like a setup, but for who? Devon crossed his arms and snorted. "You're bluffing. You think standing here calm is going to change what's happening. The cops will be here soon and you'll be escorted out. End of story." But Darius's eyes turned to him then, and something in his expression made Devon falter mid-sentence. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even contempt. It was pity. "Who exactly do you think will be escorted out?" Darius asked softly. The question, gentle as it was, pierced deeper than a shout could have. The businessman with the Rolex whispered into his phone, "Replay that. Did you hear the way he said it, like he already knows the ending?" The air thickened. The hum of the air conditioning sounded distant now, drowned beneath the heartbeat of tension. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were waiting for him to reveal whatever it was that kept him so calm. Brittany leaned forward, unable to contain herself. Her nails tapped faster, the rhythm erratic, betraying nerves she was trying to hide. "You think you're special? You're nothing but a fraud with a fake check. We see this every week." He finally turned his full attention to her. For the first time since she tore his check, he looked directly into her eyes. His expression wasn't angry. It was steady, almost gentle, but it carried a gravity that made her breath catch. "You've already decided who I am," he said, "and that decision will cost you more than you realize." The words unsettled her more than any outburst could have. She straightened, arms folding tightly across her chest, as though she could armor herself against the weight of his calm. The teenager with the skateboard whispered to his phone, "This is chess, not checkers. He's moving pieces they can't even see." His viewer count ticked upward past 600. Angela tried to regain control. She lifted her chin, her voice louder now. "Enough of this. You are not in charge here. This is my branch, my authority." Darius's lips curved, not quite a smile, but something close. "Authority," he said slowly, "isn't always what it looks like." The businessman let out a low whistle, caught on dozens of recordings. Mrs. Chen's chat exploded. "Oh, he's about to flip this whole thing. She has no idea who she's talking to. This is giving me chills." Angela's face flushed. She opened her mouth to retort, but a new sound cut through the tension, the distant thrum of helicopter blades. Faint at first, then louder, steady, unmistakable. Customers turned their heads toward the glass doors, eyes wide, phones pressed higher. Outside, pedestrians on Peachtree Street were already pointing at the sky, phones raised, recording. Devon scoffed nervously. "Coincidence, probably news traffic." But Darius checked his watch again, as if confirming. "An appointment, right on schedule," he murmured. The whisper wasn't lost. Every phone caught it, every live stream repeated it. And in that instant, speculation became wildfire. He planned this. Who is this man? He knew the exact time. Look at his face. He's not scared at all. Angela's stomach twisted. The sound of the helicopter grew louder, pulsing like a second heartbeat over the branch. She looked at him, at his calm posture, his measured breathing, the strange certainty in his eyes. For the first time that afternoon, the power in the room slipped, not from her, not to the crowd, but to him, the veteran with the calm eyes. The man with the torn check, the man who kept glancing at the clock like it was a countdown only he understood. And the room began to realize this was no ordinary customer. This was something else entirely. The thrum of the helicopter grew louder, rolling across the marble floor and vibrating faintly through the glass doors. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't coincidence. Everyone inside the bank could hear it now, a steady, powerful rhythm that refused to be ignored. Customers craned their necks toward the windows, phones lifted like torches. Some stepped closer to the glass, murmuring in disbelief as the sleek, black aircraft cut a slow arc above Peachtree Street. The city traffic outside slowed, pedestrians stopping mid-step to watch. The whole world, it seemed, was tilting toward this single branch at this single moment. Angela Torres tried to steady herself. She forced her voice into something sharp and managerial, but even she could hear the waver underneath. "Return to your transactions, please," she said, gesturing stiffly at the line. "Everyone back to business." Nobody moved. Nobody listened. The line of customers stayed frozen, phones steady, eyes fixed not on her, but on him. Darius hadn't moved from his spot at the counter. His hands still rested flat, his breathing steady, his posture unshaken. He didn't even look toward the helicopter. Instead, he glanced at the clock again. 3:14 p.m., 30 minutes left. His lips moved softly. On time. The whisper hit the air like a spark. The businessman with the Rolex repeated it for his livestream audience. "On time," he said, shaking his head. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is no accident." Mrs. Chen's viewer count surged again, 5,000, 6,200, 7,800, her livestream comments exploding into chaos. He knew about the helicopter. This is planned, this is calculated. Is he FBI, CIA, who is he? Angela's pulse hammered. She turned to Devon, who was sweating now, despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Shut this down," she hissed under her breath. "Do something." Devon straightened, puffing his chest, trying to project authority. "Sir," he said loudly, "this has gone on long enough. You need to leave before law enforcement arrives. If you cooperate now, maybe they'll go easy on you." The words felt empty, even as he spoke them. The crowd knew it. The phones knew. Devon knew it. Darius finally shifted just slightly, his gaze sliding from the clock to Devon. His expression wasn't anger. It was something sharper, something colder. "Law enforcement," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "Be careful what you ask for." The sentence hit Devon like a slap. He faltered, his mouth opening but no words coming out. The crowd caught it instantly. The businessman whispered to his live stream, "He's not bluffing. Look at him. That's a man with nothing to fear." Brittany, desperate to reclaim some ground, leaned forward, her nails tapping furiously against the counter. "You're not fooling anyone. That's not a real check. You probably printed it on some home computer, and now you've got your little audience eating out of your hand." She sneered at the live-streaming phones. "This is all for show, smoke and mirrors." Darius turned to her then, slow and deliberate. The way he looked at her, calm, unshaken, almost pitying, made her breath catch despite herself. "The only thing that isn't real here," he said softly, "is your assumption of authority." Gasps rippled through the room. The line of customers shifted closer, emboldened. The young mother with the baby shook her head. "He's right," she said, voice trembling. She tore up his check without even looking at it. We all saw it. The elderly man in the back raised his phone higher. "They think they can treat us however they want. Not today." His wife nodded firmly beside him, her own phone recording. Mrs. Chen whispered into her mic, "This is spreading. The comments are everywhere." Bank justice is trending, Angela snapped, her composure cracking. Enough! Everyone put your phones away now! Her voice cracked against the marble walls, but it only drew more attention. The businessman turned his camera directly on her, narrating, "And here's the branch manager trying to shut down witnesses." Her face flushed scarlet, and still Darius didn't raise his voice. "You can try to silence them," he said evenly, "but you can't silence the truth." The helicopter outside lowered slightly, its rotors kicking dust across the sidewalk. People outside pointed, filming, pressing against the glass to see. Reporters were arriving now, local news vans pulling up with cameras already rolling. The digital audience surged past 10,000. TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all platforms were filling with the story in real time. Screenshots of Darius's calm expression spread like wildfire. Comments scrolled faster than anyone could read. "This is history happening right now. The calmest man I've ever seen under pressure. Who is he? He's too composed to be random. Something big is coming." "I can feel it." Angela's phone buzzed violently in her hand. Calls from corporate, texts from communications, red alerts flashing across her screen. She glanced down, pale. She didn't answer. She didn't dare. Devon swallowed hard, sweat beading. At his temple. Brittany's fingers froze mid-tap. The guard by the door shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Darius and the growing crowd. And then, for the first time, Darius moved with intention. He reached into his portfolio. Not rushed, not jerky, but slow, deliberate. The entire room held its breath. Devon tensed. The guard's hand hovered over his radio. The customers leaned in. What he drew out wasn't a weapon. It was a single sheet of heavy stock paper. He placed it face down on the counter, the movement smooth, controlled, devastating. In its simplicity, the paper sat there like a coiled serpent. Angela frowned. "What is that?" Darius glanced at the clock once more. 3:17 p.m. 27 minutes left. He looked back at her, his voice almost conversational. "Why don't you find out?" The silence that followed was deafening. The crowd pressed closer. Phones zoomed in. The paper lay untouched, its secrets hovering like smoke in the air. Outside, the helicopter loomed lower. The media swarmed, and the entire bank seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The sheet of paper sat on the counter like a live grenade. Nobody touched it. Nobody even breathed too loud. Its presence was heavier than its weight, as if the ink alone carried consequences too sharp to ignore. Angela Torres hovered inches away, her manicured hand trembling despite the rigid stance she forced her body to hold. She prided herself on control of her tone, her employees, her environment. But right now she felt the grip slipping. The helicopter's rotors still thundered outside, rattling the windows, sending vibrations through the marble floors. The crowd pressed closer, phones tilted high, each one waiting, demanding, hungry for the moment. What is that supposed to be? Brittany's voice broke the silence, pitched too high, cracking in a way that betrayed the bravado she tried to project. Darius didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on Angela, calm and steady. "Why don't you turn it over and find out?" The sentence landed like a dare. Angela hesitated, her pride screaming for her to refuse. But the silence pressing down on her, the dozens of cameras recording, the growing audience online, it was suffocating. She had no choice. Her fingers reached forward, each inch feeling like a mile. She pinched the corner of the paper and flipped it over. The color drained from her face instantly. It wasn't a counterfeit. It wasn't some meaningless prop. The official letterhead at the top glimmered under the fluorescent lights. Embossed, watermarked, undeniable. Premier United Bank, the seal of the board of directors stamped in gold. Her lips parted, but no words came. Devon leaned over her shoulder, his curiosity giving way to horror. He stumbled backward, his legs tangling, colliding with the display stand. Pamphlets for premium savings accounts spilled across the floor like confetti, absurd in their cheerfulness against the gravity of the moment. Brittany snatched the paper from Angela's nerveless hands, her eyes darting across the text. She froze. Her mouth opened as if to form words, but all that came was a faint rasp. Her fingers twitched, the page trembling in her grasp, as the name at the center of the letter branded itself into her mind. Darius King, Chief Executive Officer, Premier United Bank. The silence was thunderous. The elderly man gasped. The young mother's phone shook in her hand. The businessman in the tailored suit whispered to his live stream, his voice reverent. "Oh my God, he owns the bank." The crowd erupted in whispers, disbelief tumbling into outrage, awe, vindication. Mrs. Chen's livestream count exploded past 20,000, comments flooding so fast they blurred, "No way." "He's the CEO?" They tore up the CEO's check. "This is history." "I'm literally shaking." "Brittany is done." "Devon is done." Angela, too, the teenager with the skateboard, fell back against the wall, whispering to his own audience, "Bro, they just disrespected the CEO. This is the biggest L of all time." Angela's throat tightened. This can't be real," she stammered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The paper in Brittany's hand was real. The seal was real. The ink, the signature, real. Her denial was the only thing flimsy in the room. Darius finally lifted his eyes to her. Calm, still calm, but there was something sharper beneath it now. "You doubted a veteran," he said. "You humiliated a customer. You tore up a government document, but your biggest mistake?" His pause stretched long enough for the crowd to lean in, hanging on the silence. "Your biggest mistake was assuming authority gave you the right to strip someone of dignity." Angela's knees nearly buckled. Devon turned pale, his sweat visible even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Brittany looked like a child caught. With her hand in the fire, and Darius, still calm, pulled something else from his portfolio, a thick, embossed business card. He set it gently beside the paper. Premier United Bank, Darius King, Chief Executive Officer. Beneath it a direct phone number, a 404 area code, the kind of detail nobody could fake. "You can call and verify," he said, his tone casual, devastatingly casual. The businessman with the Rolex turned his phone camera toward the card, whispering to his audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a prank. This isn't staged. He's the CEO. They've been humiliating their own CEO for 20 minutes. The room tilted on its axis. The crowd of customers wasn't just watching anymore. They were participants. Witnesses, advocates. The young mother's baby cooed softly, the sound eerie in its innocence as grown adults around her grappled with the enormity of what they'd just seen. The elderly couple exchanged a look of vindication, shaking their heads slowly. The teenager whispered into his stream, "This is better than Netflix." Angela's phone buzzed again, harder this time. Dozens of missed calls, texts from corporate, exploding across her lock screen. She didn't need to open them to know the message. "You've just destroyed your career." "Sir?" "Mr. King, we didn't know," Devon sputtered, desperation clinging to each word. Darius turned to him, voice quiet, unyielding. "Didn't know what? That I was a man worth respect, or that I was someone who could end your career in a sentence?" Devon flinched, sweat dripping down his temple. The live streams caught every detail. The tremor in Angela's hands, the panic in Devon's eyes, the stunned silence from Brittany. The internet wasn't just watching, it was feasting. Outside, the helicopter descended toward the bank's parking lot, its landing gear folding out. Cameras pressed against the glass to capture it. Reporters pushing microphones toward the door. Customers pressing closer inside, their phones held high like lighters at a concert. Darius checked the clock again. 3:21 p.m. 20 minutes remaining. His lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Right on time," he murmured, And in that moment, every person in the branch, from the employees trembling at the counter to the strangers holding their phones, realized they weren't watching a confrontation anymore. They were witnessing the beginning of a reckoning. The helicopter's rotors slowed, their heavy thrum reverberating across the parking lot like a heartbeat no one could ignore. The whine of news van brakes screeched outside as more reporters leapt out with cameras hoisted on shoulders. Microphones jabbed toward the glass doors, flashes strobing through the lobby like lightning. Inside, Premier United Bank was no longer a bank. It was a stage, and every soul inside had a role to play. Angela Torres tried to stand tall, but her body betrayed her, the slight tremor in her hands, the quiver along her jawline. Devon Harris dabbed sweat from his forehead with a crumpled tissue, but the sweat came faster than he could keep up. Brittany Coleman had shrunk behind the counter, her Employee of the Month badge glinting under the fluorescent light, an irony that none of the live stream audiences missed. And then the glass doors swung. Open, Patricia Wong entered like a storm system, all sharp edges and precision. Her heels clacked a cadence of authority. Her tailored navy suit pressed so sharply it looked weaponized. Behind her trailed two figures, James Lau, the corporate communications director, his phone glued to his hand, face pale with calculation, and Sarah Mitchell, legal counsel, already typing furiously into a tablet as if drafting responses before the fallout even hit. The room went silent, but for the faint buzz of live-stream notifications pinging across a dozen phones. Patricia's gaze swept the lobby, absorbing everything. The torn fragments of the check, the trembling employees, the dense wall of customers pressing closer with their cameras raised. Her eyes finally settled on Darius. "Mr. King," she said, her voice sharp and unwavering. "I came as soon as you called." Angela's knees nearly buckled. "Mr. King." "Not sir, not individual. Mr. King." The words rolled like thunder through the marble lobby. The crowd erupted in whispers, customers gasping, live-stream audiences surging with comments. She called him Mr. King. She knows him. He really is the CEO. Darius inclined his head slightly, his composure unbroken. "Patricia, thank you for arriving promptly." "You asked me to bring the helicopter," Patricia replied smoothly. "It's waiting outside." The employees' faces drained of color. Helicopter. This wasn't just recognition. This was deference. The businessman with the Rolex whispered into his phone camera, "Ladies and gentlemen," the regional director herself just deferred to him. "This isn't a story anymore. This is a corporate earthquake." Angela stumbled forward, her words tumbling out in desperation. "Ms. Wong, This was a misunderstanding. We followed protocol. The check looked suspicious. Patricia cut her off with a glance sharp enough to slice through steel. "Protocol?" she repeated. "Which protocol exactly authorizes destroying a government-issued disability compensation check while humiliating the customer in front of dozens of witnesses?" Angela's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Devon tried to step in, but his voice cracked. We didn't know who he was." The words sealed their fate. Darius finally spoke, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that made everyone in the room listen. "That's the problem, isn't it? You treat people differently based on who you think they are. If I had walked in wearing a suit and Rolex, you would have smiled and offered me investment packages. But because I wore jeans and boots, you saw a fraud instead of a man." His words struck deeper than anger. They cut with precision, scalpel sharp, impossible to dismiss. The elderly man in line called out, "That's exactly right!" His wife nodded vigorously beside him. "We've all seen it before," customers murmured in agreement, their voices rising like a chorus. Patricia turned to Sarah Mitchell, the legal counsel. "Document everything," she said crisply. "This isn't just one incident. It's systemic." Sarah was already typing furiously. Discrimination exposure, regulatory risk. Title 18, Section 1441, destruction of federal property. Estimated liability, millions. Angela's chest constricted. Devon's hands shook. Brittany pressed her back harder into her chair, eyes wide, face pale. Darius lifted the taped-together check from the counter, holding it gently, like something sacred that had survived desecration. "This was never about money," he said. "It was about dignity, and you failed." Mrs. Chen's livestream hit 25,000 viewers. The comments were relentless. "Fire them now. This man is teaching a masterclass in power. This is bigger than a bank. This is about all of us." The crowd clapped, spontaneously, the sound swelling through the marble chamber. Even the young mother joined in, her baby cooing softly as though in approval. Patricia turned to Angela, her tone final. "Ms. Torres, effective immediately. You are relieved of your managerial position. You will report for reassignment and remedial training. Pending review, demotion is permanent." Angela gasped audibly. Devon tried to speak, but Patricia's gaze cut him off. "Mr. Harris, you are terminated. Security will escort you from the building. Ms. Coleman likewise." Brittany's mouth fell open. "Terminated? But you tore up your CEO's check on camera," Patricia said coldly. "You're fortunate we don't press charges." The crowd roared with approval, applause echoing like a wave. Phones shook with excitement as live streams caught every word. The hashtag #ShabankReckoning began trending nationally, but Darius wasn't done. He turned, not to the employees, but to the customers, the witnesses, the digital army who had turned this moment into history. His voice carried the authority of a man who wasn't just defending himself but leading a movement. "This is bigger than me," he said. "What happened here happens in quiet corners every day. People humiliated, dismissed, judged by their clothes, their skin, their assumptions. Today it was caught on camera. Tomorrow it must be stopped everywhere." The businessman with the Rolex whispered into his phone, "We are witnessing history. This is how institutions change." Outside, news crews jostled for position, reporters shouting questions through the glass. The helicopter's blades ticked slower now, waiting, ready. Darius checked his watch one last time. 3:30 p.m., 15 minutes remaining. He placed the repaired check into Patricia's hands. "Deposit this," he said softly, "not as a transaction, as a lesson." She nodded firmly. "Yes, Mr. King." And with that, the bank, the very institution that had tried to strip him of dignity, now stood as the stage of its own undoing. The reckoning had begun. The cameras outside pressed against the glass doors now, the flashes popping in rapid fire. Bursts as though the marble lobby had become a crime scene. Reporters were shouting questions, their voices muffled through the thick panes. "Mr. King, what happened here today? Is it true you were humiliated by your own staff? What changes will you make after this?" The words beat against the bank, like fists demanding entry. Inside, silence reigned except for the faint clicking of Sarah Mitchell's tablet as she recorded every detail, every consequence, every new protocol forming in real time. Patricia Wong turned to Darius, the repaired check in her hand, her voice reverent now. "Mr. King, your deposit will be processed immediately, but I suspect this is about more than a transaction." Darius stepped forward, his voice carrying with the authority of a man who knew every camera was pointed at him, every microphone straining to capture his words. "It is." The crowd leaned in. The businessman with the Rolex whispered into his livestream, "This is it. This is where it shifts from punishment to transformation." Darius turned, not to Patricia, not to the employees, but to the customers. The people who had watched, recorded, and spread this moment into history. His eyes swept across them, steady and unflinching. "This isn't about me being CEO. This isn't about a check. This is about dignity." It's about every person who's ever been looked down on, doubted, humiliated, because someone decided they didn't look the part. The room pulsed with silence, heavy and electric. He held up the taped check, the scars running through its paper-like wounds stitched together. This is a symbol, torn apart by arrogance, but still valid, still powerful, still undeniable, just like the people you dismiss every day. Mrs. Chen's live stream soared past 40,000 viewers. Comments scrolled faster than anyone could read. Preach! This is bigger than banking. He's turning pain into power. Darius lowered the check, his voice tightening. For 8 months I've been conducting quiet research, visiting branches, observing behavior, recording incidents. The numbers are staggering. Discrimination complaints in this region are 3 times higher than the national average. African American customer retention is down 34%. Veterans report higher rejection rates for loans and deposits than any other group. Gasps rippled through the customers. Angela's mouth opened in disbelief. Devon shook his head mutely, but his pale face told the truth. He knew the numbers weren't fabricated. Patricia's expression hardened. These figures are accurate, she confirmed, her tone like a hammer striking steel. I've seen the preliminary reports. Darius continued, his words rolling out steady, unshakable. That ends today. We are implementing what I call the Washington Standard. The phrase landed like a stone in water, sending ripples through the crowd, through the live streams, through the corporate staff who were already typing it into their notes. What does that mean? The businessman asked, voice barely above a whisper, his phone still streaming. It means, Darius said, his voice rising, that every single customer who walks through these doors, whether in Atlanta or New York or Los Angeles, will be treated with identical respect, identical service, identical dignity. No more profiling, no more assumptions, no more gatekeeping based on appearance, race, or economic status. Every customer will be seen, every customer will be valued. Applause erupted from the crowd, loud, raw, uncontained. Phones shook with excitement as live stream audiences roared in digital unison. Patricia nodded firmly, her voice ringing with authority. Effective immediately, the Washington Standard will be written into policy. All employees will undergo mandatory training. Every branch will install customer interaction recording systems within 60 days. Complaints will escalate directly to board-level review. Sarah Mitchell raised her eyes from her tablet. We will also form partnerships with civil rights organizations, veterans groups, and third-party auditors. Quarterly reports will be made public. Transparency will not be optional. The applause doubled, cheers echoing across the marble chamber. Customers clapped until their palms stung. The young mother raised her phone high, tears welling in her eyes as she whispered, This is history. Angela, Brittany, and Devon stood frozen in the corner, their careers unraveling in real time. But the spotlight was no longer on them. The story had outgrown their small cruelties. This was about systems now. This was about change. Darius raised his hand slightly, and the applause quieted into an expectant hush. But understand this. Change doesn't begin with me. It begins with all of us. Record injustice when you see it. Speak up when you're dismissed. Refuse to accept silence when dignity is torn apart. Because if today proved anything, it's that one voice, one phone, one video can spark a movement. Mrs. Chen's live stream surged to 50,000 viewers. Comments poured in like a flood. I'm crying right now. He turned humiliation into hope. This needs to be in every industry, not just banks. The businessman with the Rolex, his voice trembling with awe, whispered into his stream, This isn't a bank policy. This is a blueprint for America. Outside, the media pressed harder, their cameras hungry, their questions sharper. The helicopter's rotors slowed into silence, waiting for its passenger. Patricia stepped closer to Darius, her tone deferential. "Mr. King, the car is waiting, or the helicopter if you prefer." Darius didn't move. He simply looked around. The lobby one last time. The torn check, the trembling employees, the applauding customers, the witnesses who had transformed into warriors of truth. He let the silence hang, powerful and heavy. Then he spoke, softer now, but every word resonant. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." And the bank, the city, perhaps even the nation understood. The Washington Standard wasn't just policy. It was a promise. The glass doors of Premier United Bank burst open, and the flood began. Reporters surged forward like a tidal wave. Microphones extended, cameras flashing in chaotic bursts. The marble lobby, once hushed and routine, now pulsed with chaos. Shouted, and questions, the shrill whine of recording equipment, the blur of camera lights bouncing off polished floors. "Mr. King, is it true your own employees destroyed your check? Do you believe this incident is racially motivated? What is the Washington Standard, and will it apply nationwide? How do you respond to those saying this is the end of Premier's reputation?" Every question overlapped, layered, a cacophony of demands. The crowd of customers, once passive observers, were now part of the spectacle. Phones still lifted high, live streams rolling uninterrupted, their footage blending with the press's professional cameras to create a storm of perspectives. Mrs. Chen clutched her phone like a lifeline, whispering to her 70,000-strong audience, "It's happening. The world is watching." Angela Torres tried to shrink into the shadows near the teller windows, but the cameras found her anyway. Flashes caught her pale face, her trembling hands. Devon shielded his eyes, stammering under his breath. "I didn't know. We didn't know." Brittany collapsed into her chair, her badge glinting under the harsh light. Employee of the month, now immortalized as the face of disgrace. But the press didn't want them. They wanted him. Darius King stood calm and unflinching, his plain jeans and boots somehow radiating more authority than any suit in the room. His presence commanded attention, not loud, not aggressive, but steady, measured, undeniable. "Mr. King," a CNN correspondent shouted over the chaos, "how does it feel to be humiliated in your own bank?" Darius's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time since the ordeal began, he allowed a faint smile to break his calm. "It doesn't feel like humiliation," he said, his voice carrying above the noise, steady as a drumbeat. "It feels like clarity. Today the world saw what happens behind marble counters and polite smiles, and today we start to change it." The room erupted in more questions, flashes, murmurs. His words had the weight of headlines already. "Patricia." Wong raised her voice, sharp and commanding. "One at a time. Mr. King will answer questions, but this is not a circus." Her attempt at order barely dented the frenzy. The businessman with the Rolex whispered into his live stream, "This isn't a press conference. This is a revolution." A young reporter from a local Atlanta station pushed forward, breathless. "Mr. King, are these employees being fired because of who you are, the CEO, or because of how they treated you?" Darius turned toward her, his gaze unwavering. "They are being held accountable, not because I am CEO, but because I am a man. Because every man, every woman, every customer who walks into this bank deserves dignity, and when you strip someone of that dignity, there are consequences." The lobby fell into a hush, the weight of his words stilling even the most frenzied. "Cameras," the young mother with the baby whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's it. That's the truth." Her phone trembled as her live-stream chat exploded with hearts and applause emojis. NBC's correspondent shouted above the silence, "Mr. King, what is the Washington Standard, and will you enforce it personally?" Darius lifted the taped check again, holding it high like a symbol. The scars running across it gleamed under the lights. This check is still valid, no matter how torn it became, and so is every person who walks through these doors. The Washington standard is simple: equal treatment, equal respect, equal service. It will be enforced at every branch, every interaction, every transaction, and yes, I will enforce it personally. The crowd erupted in cheers. Customers clapped, phones shook with energy, live-stream audiences surged past 100,000 across platforms. Angela's legs finally gave way, and she collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Devon muttered to himself, "We're ruined, ruined." Brittany sat frozen, her wide eyes locked on the floor, as if the marble itself might swallow her whole. But no one cared. Their downfall was no longer the story. The teenager with the skateboard shouted from the back, his phone still. Filming, "Mr. King, you just changed the game." His TikTok audience ballooned in real time, comments exploding with fire emojis and declarations that this was the moment of the decade. Patricia stepped forward, her voice steel. Effective immediately, Premier United will issue a national press release confirming the Washington standard. We will cooperate fully with the media, but let's be clear, today's message isn't about damage control, it's about reform. James Lau, the communications director, nearly stumbled over his words as he typed furiously into his phone. "Trending already," he muttered, pale. "Washington Standard is at 2.3 million mentions in 10 minutes. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, local affiliates, they all streamed the scene live." The footage cut between Darius's calm face, the trembling employees, the cheering customers, and the helicopter blades still gleaming outside. Across America, living rooms and phones lit up with the story. Darius turned once more to the crowd, his voice soft now, but no less commanding. "You don't change the world with anger alone. You change it with preparation, with clarity, with truth. That's why we're here today. That's why this matters." The businessman with the Rolex whispered into his camera, his voice cracking. "With emotion, we're not just witnessing a story, we're witnessing the blueprint of a new era." The crowd thundered again, applause rattling the marble floors. Outside, traffic had snarled to a standstill, pedestrians flooding sidewalks to catch even a glimpse of the spectacle inside. And through it all, Darius stood calm, his voice anchoring the storm, his presence transforming humiliation into history. The media storm had begun, and there was no going back. The news vans hadn't even cut their engines before the first wave of broadcasts hit the air. "Breaking news out of Atlanta tonight," the CNN anchor declared, her tone urgent. "A shocking confrontation at Premier. United Bank has gone viral after employees allegedly destroyed a check belonging to their own CEO, who also happens to be a decorated black veteran." The footage rolled on screens across the nation, clips from Mrs. Chen's live stream, shaky and raw, intercut with high-definition shots from network cameras. Brittany's smirk as she ripped the check, Devon's sneer, Angela's theatrical suspicion. And then the reveal. The embossed letterhead, the business card, the stunned silence. Darius King standing steady as the truth unfurled. Fox News ran it with a different angle. "Disgrace at Premier United. A CEO disguised in plain clothes tests his own bank and exposes shocking bias." MSNBC's ticker scrolled across the bottom of the screen. The Washington Standard, proposed after viral banking incident. By the time the evening news cycle began, the video had been viewed 4.6 million times on TikTok alone. Twitter, no, X, was aflame. Washington Standard trended #1. Bank Reckoning and Check the Check weren't far behind. On Instagram, reels of the helicopter circling above the bank were paired with dramatic captions. He didn't just cash the check, he cashed in his power. At barbershops in Chicago, the footage played on TVs above buzzing clippers. Men shook their heads, some clapping, some muttering curses about the same thing happening to me last month. In a coffee shop in Seattle, college students gathered around a laptop, murmuring in awe at the plot twist. On military bases from Texas to North Carolina, veterans forwarded the link through private group chats, pride swelling in their messages. One of us. Finally. But the shockwave wasn't just cultural, it was political. By nightfall, Georgia's governor released a statement. Every Georgian deserves equal treatment at financial institutions. Today's events prove we must hold these entities accountable. Senators weighed in. Congress members tweeted support. One congresswoman posted a clip of Darius lifting the torn check like a flag of defiance, writing, "Dignity is not negotiable." Civil rights leaders called for meetings. Veteran organizations demanded copies of Darius's Washington Standard for their own advocacy. Even the White House press secretary, pressed by reporters that evening, offered careful words. The president has seen the footage. He believes what happened was unacceptable and that systemic reform is overdue. At Premier United's Manhattan headquarters, panic collided with calculation. Stock traders were already reacting. The share price had dipped 3% mid-afternoon when the first videos spread. But then something unusual happened. As word of the reforms, the Washington Standard, and the swift corporate accountability spread, the stock rebounded. By closing bell, it was up 2% over the morning's open. Investors smelled transformation and profit in the chaos. Inside the Atlanta branch, long after customers had left and reporters still lingered outside, Darius stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. He could feel the magnitude of what he had unleashed pressing on his shoulders, but he bore it with the same quiet steadiness he'd carried all day. Patricia Wong approached, her voice low but firm. "Mr. King, the National Board is already scheduling an emergency call. Every executive wants to know if this was a one-time spectacle or the start of a revolution." Darius didn't move from the window. His reflection in the glass looked calm, but behind his eyes burned the weight of memory. Afghanistan deserts, folded flags handed to mothers, nights spent planning reforms no one wanted to hear until now. "Tell them," he said finally, his tone even, "that revolutions don't start. They're revealed." Behind him, Sarah Mitchell, the legal counsel, looked up from her tablet. "We're getting subpoenas already. Civil rights attorneys are demanding documents. Regulators want to know how many complaints we've buried." James Lau, the communications director, ran a shaking hand through his hair. "And the media won't stop. NBC wants you live tomorrow. Good Morning America, even Bloomberg. This is everywhere." Darius turned slowly, his voice calm enough to steady the panic in the room. "Good. Let it spread." The businessman with the Rolex, still lingering with his phone pressed to his chest, whispered to his live stream. "Do you hear him? He wants it to spread. He's not afraid of exposure. He's inviting it." His viewers exploded with comments. "This is leadership." He turned a trap into a megaphone. "I've never seen anything like this." Angela sat slumped in a chair, mascara streaking her cheeks. She wasn't the villain of a small story anymore. She was the symbol of a national disgrace. Devon paced with a broken expression, muttering about ruined futures. Brittany rocked slightly, staring into nothing, her employee badge now infamous across social media. But their shame was only a footnote now. The main story was Darius King. The billionaire who walked into his own bank like an ordinary man was treated as less than human and walked out rewriting the rules of corporate America. By midnight, hashtags had spread beyond banking. Washington Standard was being invoked in conversations about hiring bias, housing discrimination, even healthcare. Activists saw a blueprint. Politicians saw a weapon. Ordinary citizens saw hope. In a diner in Detroit, an old man shook his head at the TV. "I've been waiting my whole life to see someone with power make them listen." And in Atlanta, on the marble floors of a bank that would never be ordinary again, Darius King prepared for what came next, because the shockwave wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The following morning, the headlines painted America in bold, unforgettable strokes. The New York Times: bank CEO humiliated in Atlanta. Branch sparks nationwide movement. The Wall Street Journal: The Washington Standard: a new era of accountability in finance. USA Today: from torn check to national reckoning. Every network replayed the footage. Brittany's smirk, Devon's condescension, Angela's cold dismissal, and then the reveal. The gold-embossed letterhead, the business card, the helicopter landing in the parking lot. But as the nation applauded, a storm brewed behind closed doors. In Manhattan, inside a skyscraper office high above Wall Street, rival executives gathered in a smoke-glass boardroom. The room was all steel and tension, the city skyline glittering beyond. "He's dangerous," one gray-haired CEO said, stabbing his finger against the polished mahogany table. Darius King has turned one incident into a national crusade. If the Washington Standard spreads, every one of us is exposed. A younger banker leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Exposed? Please, this is theater. Give it a week. Social media will move on." But the oldest man in the room, a legend of finance with silver hair and a voice like gravel, shook his head slowly. "No, this is different. People don't rally around theater. They rally around truth. And King is speaking a truth they've felt their whole lives." The boardroom fell silent, the weight of his words undeniable. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., regulators scrambled. The FDIC, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, all received a flood of calls from citizens demanding reform. Congressional staffers drafted memos. Senators whispered in hallways. Lobbyists sharpened their knives. One lobbyist for a rival banking association slammed his fist on a desk. "We cannot let one man dictate industry standards. Do you have any idea what compliance with the Washington Standard would cost? Billions. Every branch, every employee, retrained. Monitoring systems, AI oversight. It's not sustainable." Across town, a civil rights leader appeared live on MSNBC, her voice fiery with conviction. Unsustainable. No, discrimination is unsustainable. Darius King has exposed what we've known for decades. Now the industry has no choice but to evolve. The battle lines were drawn. Back in Atlanta, Darius sat in the corner of a quiet hotel suite, the curtains drawn. Patricia Wong, James Lau, and Sarah Mitchell sat across from him, the glow of laptops illuminating their faces. The room buzzed with urgent energy, calls from New York, emails from D.C., notifications lighting up every device. "Wall Street's mobilizing against you," Sarah said flatly. "They're calling the Washington Standard unrealistic, performative, even dangerous." "Regulators are split," James added. "Some want to embrace it, others are terrified of the precedent. And rivals, Chase, Wells, Citibank, they're circling. If they can paint this as a stunt, they'll bury us." Patricia's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "So we can't let them. We need to double down, make this too big to bury. Mr. King, this is war." Darius leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Outside the window, Atlanta traffic pulsed like veins of light. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, "Good," he murmured. "War means they're afraid, and fear means they know change is possible." The silence in the room was electric. Meanwhile, on the streets, the fallout grew louder. At another premier branch in Chicago, customers arrived holding signs, "Implement the Washington Standard now." In Los Angeles, veterans marched outside a downtown branch chanting, "Respect, dignity, equality." TikTok compilations of the incident surpassed 20 million views, stitched with ordinary Americans recounting their own humiliations, torn checks, denied loans, suspicious stares. In one viral clip, a single mother held up her child and said through tears, "I was told once I didn't look like someone who could afford a savings account." Yesterday, Darius King proved we all look like dignity. But not all reactions were supportive. In certain corners of the internet, resistance festered. Anonymous posts attacked Darius personally, spreading rumors about his past, questioning his wealth, twisting his calm demeanor into conspiracy. One headline on a fringe site blared, "CEO, orchestrated entire incident, staged discrimination for publicity." Patricia shoved the article across the table in the hotel suite. "This is how they'll fight you. Discredit, distract, divide." Darius studied the headline for a long moment. Then he folded the paper neatly and set it aside. Let them try. Truth has a way of surviving. Back in New York, the rival CEOs ended their secret meeting with a chilling resolution. The silver-haired veteran of finance leaned forward, his voice gravel and venom. "King has thrown the first stone. But make no mistake, if he thinks he can upend an empire built over centuries, he's wrong. We will fight him, and if he insists on war, we will bury him under the weight of his own standard." The men nodded grimly, their shadows long against the boardroom glass. The fallout had begun, and somewhere in Atlanta, Darius King knew. The real battle wasn't in a marble bank lobby anymore. It was in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in the soul of a nation deciding what dignity was worth. The night before the board's emergency summit, the nation felt like it was holding its breath. Cable news anchors replayed the Atlanta footage on loop. Hashtags blazed across every platform. Protesters camped outside premier branches from Boston to Dallas, chanting into the night, their voices echoing into the marble lobbies where tellers shifted nervously behind counters. Rival banks released carefully worded statements, condemning unverified viral moments, their legal teams whispering that the Washington Standard posed an existential threat. And in a dimly lit suite, 30 stories above Atlanta's skyline, Darius King prepared for battle. The war had come, just as he knew it would. Patricia Wong paced the room, her heels tapping out a rhythm of anxiety. James Lowe was hunched over his laptop, his face pale, muttering about stock fluctuations and hostile media campaigns. Sarah Mitchell had a stack of folders in her lap, her pen tapping against them as she listed incoming subpoenas and lawsuits like a grim tally of war casualties. "Mr. King," Patricia said sharply, stopping mid-stride, "they'll come at you with everything. The rivals, the regulators, even Congress. They'll call this ego. They'll say you weaponized humiliation to consolidate power." Darius sat in a simple chair, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. The Atlanta lights glittered behind him, but his gaze was fixed on the torn check resting on the table. The tape lines across it gleamed like scars, a reminder of what started it all. "They've already made their move," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "Now it's time for ours." The following morning, the emergency board meeting convened in New York. A cavernous conference hall, all glass and chrome, filled with the most powerful financial leaders in the country. Dozens of suits, polished shoes, diamond watches. There, expressions cold, guarded. At the head of the table, Darius King entered in jeans and boots. The contrast was jarring. One man dressed like he belonged to the people, facing a room dressed like they owned the world. The cameras were absent here. This was private, secret, the place where empires protected themselves. One rival executive wasted no time. "Mr. King, your so-called Washington Standard is reckless, unrealistic. It will cost billions and destabilize our industry. You've turned a personal grievance into a crusade." Another leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Do You understand what you've done? You've incited protests. You've dragged our institutions into chaos. This isn't leadership, it's vanity. Darius didn't flinch. He simply laid the taped check on the table. The room fell silent, dozens of pairs of eyes locked on the torn paper. This, he said calmly, is not vanity. This is reality. It happened in your bank. It happens in every bank. And if it happened to me, a man with power, privilege, and resources, then imagine what happens to those with none. That's not vanity. That's truth. The silver-haired titan of Wall Street leaned forward, his voice gravelly. Truth doesn't pay shareholders. Darius met his gaze unblinking. But trust does, and trust is what you're losing. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Meanwhile, outside the skyscraper, the world was watching anyway. Protesters filled the streets of Manhattan. News helicopters hovered above. Every screen in Times Square replayed clips of Atlanta, Darius's voice booming over the crowd. Every customer deserves dignity. Inside, the debate grew heated. Executives shouted over one another. Some sided with Darius, desperate to ride the wave of reform. Others raged, warning of financial collapse. Patricia Wong whispered updates into Darius's ear, stock prices climbing. Despite the chaos, politicians calling for hearings, customers flooding branches demanding the Washington Standard immediately. The opposition grew louder, desperate. "You'll destroy us!" one man shouted, sweat glistening at his temple. Darius rose slowly, his height commanding silence. He picked up the torn check, holding it high above the gleaming boardroom table. "You think this destroys us?" his voice thundered, now filling every corner of the glass chamber. "This ignoring dignity, destroying trust is what destroys us. What I'm offering isn't destruction, it's survival." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the twist. Darius reached into his portfolio and pulled out another document, thicker, heavier, its seal gleaming under the recessed lights. He slid it across the table, his movements deliberate. The executives leaned forward, confusion etched on their faces. Sarah Mitchell's lips curved into the faintest smile. Patricia's eyes narrowed in recognition. James Lau covered his mouth. With his hand, the silver-haired titan read the document first, and his face went pale. It was a merger agreement, not proposed, executed, signed, sealed, finalized. Overnight, Darius King had orchestrated a silent acquisition, leveraging his billions, his influence, and the viral momentum sweeping the nation. The words burned across the page. Premier United Bank absorbs First Liberty, Crescent Trust and Metro Capital, forming the largest consumer bank in the United States. Gasps filled the room. You already did this," one executive stammered. Darius nodded, calm as stone. "While you were plotting against me, I was building around you. The Washington Standard isn't a proposal. It's the law of the largest bank in America, and you—" He paused, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces. "Now answer to me." The weight of the revelation crushed the room. Rivals who had schemed to bury him now sat under his authority. Executives who had mocked him now realized they were his subordinates. Patricia broke the silence with 4 words. "Checkmate, gentlemen. Checkmate." Outside, the news broke like a lightning strike. Screens across Times Square blared, "King pulls off historic merger, Washington Standard becomes national policy." Protesters roared in triumph, reporters screamed into cameras. Live streams surged into millions of viewers, and in Atlanta, Mrs. Chen refreshed her Facebook Live one more time, whispering to her audience of hundreds of thousands, "He didn't just own the moment, he owns the bank, all of them." The fallout had ended. The reckoning was complete. Darius King didn't just win a battle, he changed the war, and the torn check, the scarred piece of paper that started it all, was framed in glass in Premier's headquarters by week's end, not as a reminder of humiliation, But as a reminder of the day, dignity became non-negotiable.